What is it about sand dunes that is so overwhelming, treacherous, and yet alluring? How do people and communities live in this desolate area in comparison to cities? Do they wish to leave? Hi, my name is Arim. Today I'll be looking at the juxtaposition of city mindset and country mindset of Japanese culture as portrayed in Hiroshi Teshigahara's Woman in the Dunes. Before we start, I would like to let you know that this video is filled with spoilers. Also, content warning, this movie is not rated, but includes sex, nudity, risk of rape, mild profanity, and mild drinking and smoking. The story. Woman in the Dunes follows the character of Niki Junpei, who is a school teacher in Tokyo, but is wandering around the dunes of a beach looking for tiger beetles. After missing a bus, he was offered shelter by the villagers and led to the house of a woman deep inside a pit. After spending a night, Junpei realizes he is trapped in the pit with her and tries to escape multiple times. However, he comes to understand the ways of living in the dunes, giving up his insect collection but finding a new purpose in collecting water in a barrel. When the woman is taken to a doctor for her ectopic pregnancy, he is given the opportunity to leave but chooses to stay and continue working on his well. Some of the Gusen's legacies that apply to this film are stories of the self, stories of love and obsession, and stories of political and social comment. We can see the narrative style of stories of the self with Niki Junpei's interior monologue at the beginning of the movie, and by how the movie follows Junpei's singular perspective throughout the film. We can see the stories of love and obsession in the relationship between Junpei and the woman, although they exhibit a distorted love, more sensual and animal-like than emotional attachment. Stories of political and social comment is more subtly hinted through the dialogue, at times mentioning lack of employment, rapid urbanization, and government not putting the well-being of the people first. The film also juxtaposes the differing ideologies between people of the city and people of the country through how Junpei and the woman disagree strongly about those very ideas. Making of the film and public reception. The director of Woman in the Dunes, Hiroshi Teshigahara, lived from 1927 to 2001 and grew up in an avant-garde art community and practiced pottery. His father Toshu founded Sogetsu, a world-famous flower arranging school. He graduated from Tokyo National University of Fine Arts and Music in 1950 and started making documentary films with people who were deeply influenced by European film, literature, and philosophy. His first feature film, Pitfall, 1962, was made in collaboration with Kobo Abe and Toru Takemitsu, whom he collaborated again with for Woman in the Dunes. The screenplay and 1962 novel was written by Kobo Abe, who lived from 1924 to 1993. He was born in Tokyo and grew up in Mukden, Manchuria, while his father did medical research in Tokyo. As a child, he was interested in insect collecting, mathematics, and reading Western literature. He studied medicine at Tokyo Imperial University in 1943 to avoid being a soldier during the war, and mainly wrote poetry and political commentary until writing the novel The Woman in the Dunes. Both of these men were part of the survivors' generation who had come through a catastrophe of World War II and were driven by a sense of urgency often found in people who have had a brush with death. Abe was an existentialist and was inspired from Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus. Toru Takemitsu, the composer for Teshigahara's best films, was a jazz aficionado. And Teshigahara was deeply influenced by French and Italian neorealist films. What these all have in common is the characteristics of 1960s Japan. The 1960s in Japan was during the Showa era that lasted from 1926 to 1989. The 60s were after World War II and were called the Golden Age of Japan's conservative regime. The Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, was dominating elections and public policy. The economy was expanding at white-hot speed, and problems of foreign policy were either absent or casually ignored. During this time of Japan's separation from other countries, however, similar sentiments of existentialism were brewing up in Japan and France simultaneously. In 1959, Jean-Luc Godard released A Bout de Souffle, Breathless, that started the French New Wave, filled with stories of rebellious youth, while Oshima Nagisa released Ai to Kibo no Machi, A Town of Love and Hope. However, the Japanese New Wave start came from a very conservative movie company, Sochiko, who used the rebelliousness of young talent during early demonstrations against the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty. This means that the movement arose within the confines of one of the world's most rigidly commercial cinemas, unlike France and England, with mostly independent filmmakers. When the book was published in 1962, it was awarded the 1962 Yomiuri Prize for Literature. And when the movie was released in 1964, it was met with international acclaim. It won the Special Jury Prize at the Cannes Film Festival in 1964 and was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film Oscar in 1964, nominated for the Best Director Oscar in 1965, and won the Grand Prix of the Belgian Film Critics Association in 1967. Woman in the Dunes is located at a transitional moment between post-war and contemporary cinema. Influenced by post-World War II existentialism, the film on one level is a critique of the rapid westernization that Japan underwent after the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we can see the references to the atomic bomb throughout the movie. What does Hiroshi Teshigahara's Woman in the Dunes reveal about Japanese culture? Teshigahara Hiroshi's Woman in the Dunes reveals that within Japanese culture, there is a conflict of viewpoints between people from the city, represented by Niki Junpei, and people from the country, represented by the widow. A country mindset is much more conservative and sedentary than a city mindset, which is more progressive and active. First, Niki Junpei, the protagonist, reflects on his city relationship with a woman and compares marriage to certificates to prove innocence from cheating. The idea of a relationship as a contract is very modern and city-like, where many contracts are made and broken faster and more lightly if the conditions aren't met. Relationships in the dunes or the country, however, are more indefinite, like the pit. The widow says, "This life's really too hard for a woman alone," implying that the reason for a man and a woman to stay together is for the necessity of survival. There is no way of getting out of it, and the man and woman just deal with the situation they are in. It is more traditional in the sense that commitment comes first as an inevitability, and attraction follows, rather than the city where attraction comes first and commitment needs to be enforced with laws. Second, how proactive people are in terms of their living situation and how much trust they have in the policies governing their lives is different in the city and the country. Junpei suggests to the woman, let them deal with the sand scientifically with tree fences or something. However, he is appalled when she replies, they calculated that it's much cheaper this way, and doesn't question any of the decision-making. Junpei is used to the constant coups d'etats going on in the city, as Junpei reads in the newspaper. Unlike the extreme of the country, the city is at its own extreme, overthrowing the government again and again until there is no structure to uphold any laws. In both situations, the people are stuck in situations they want to change, but the response varies differently. Third, in Japan, there's a sense of identity found in the location people live in, but it is found in different aspects of the location for Junpei and the widow. Junpei argues that he needs to go back to the city because he is a respected teacher and is registered with the city. The city gives him identity because it employs him and gives him a title he can wear. However, the widow reasons that people stay in the dunes because the village has real local spirit, love of our birthplace. The dunes give her identity because it is where she was born and not much else of a reason. Even if she had no title, nothing to gain from living there, she would still stay. Artistic media, personification, and dehumanization. Throughout the film, the prominence of the sand is undeniable. Gregory Stevens, in an issue of Kinema, articulates that the use and depiction of sand throughout the movie gives nature in the form of sand a starring role and gives a form of agency to the sand that is clearly far more powerful than the agency of the humans who live in its domain. The sand is one of the driving forces of the plot and therefore very much like a beautiful and terrifying villain of the story, trapping the main character in this situation. Not only is the sand personified and used as a source of danger and conflict, but it also symbolizes country life and is representative of the ideologies the woman has. The insects and the insect-like people of the town truly appreciate the sand and its moisture. Although it is boring on the surface, people find value in the monotony of simply maintaining their livelihoods in the sand. Relationships, laws, and identity are as unchanging as the terrain, but the sand fills every crevice, making every part of someone's life in relation to the dunes. People fall in love with it because it is so deeply ingrained in their lives. Junpei becomes more and more acclimated into the dune way of living, and this is shown in many ways, but most interestingly in the texture of sand and skin. Stevens points out that Teshigahara centers his visual narrative in the interface between sand and skin, and in the process of observing how sand seeps into skin. Junpei starts off in a boat, well separated from the sand, above the sand. He is able to keep the sand off by emptying his shoes or washing his clothes. However, before he can realize it, the sand invades all the crevices of his life, and he becomes inseparable from it. His clothes become similar to the woman's, more practical for working in the sand rather than leaving sand out. Talking about Junpei's transition into compliance leads us to the comparison of humans to animals. Junpei collects bugs, but as the story progresses, his movements are comparable to that of a bug or insect as well. While in the beginning of the story, Junpei takes the cruel observer's role, killing insects and trapping them in vials for the sake of science, the villagers take his role, trapping him in the pit, observing him for entertainment and the sake of the society. Therefore, it is significant when Junpei burns all his insects in the fire to give his collecting box for the woman's beads. He is giving up not only his purpose for being in the dunes, but also his sense of superiority to the dune. He made a sacrifice for the sake of the woman's livelihood and care towards him. From that moment, he became a part of the dune and changed his mindset to improve his life in tandem with his situation. He then became like the bugs in the sand and changed his hobby to collecting water. This refers back to the way city mindset differs from country mindset. In the city, where people are more removed from nature, there is a sense of humans being superior to nature and observing it from a higher perspective. However, in the country where people are living in nature, humans are seen more as a part of it. Superiority in the countryside, however, comes from control of resources rather than a sense of intellectual high ground. Therefore, when Junpei starts to collect water, he gains back power and autonomy. Now, how do you like Woman in the Dunes after watching this video? This was Arin, and I'll see you later.